1977 and reopened in 1992. It is now a branch of the National Museum of Art of Romania. The Zambaccian Museum represents the history of Romanian painting in a nutshell, introducing to the public illustrious names like Nicolae Grigorescu, Tonița, or Ion Andreescu.
I would like to start already with presenting a few of the works by these famous Romanian painters that are present here where we actually stay now, and we are going to discover all of them in several environments inside the house.
This room presents several stages of Nicolae Grigorescu's career, from his youth, when he made the passage from the painting of icons to what we may call secular painting, to his French period at the beginning of the 60s, that is in around 1861. He went to Paris, where he studied art at the École des Beaux-Arts, and later on he went to Barbizon, and from this period we have in this room the entrance to Fontainebleau Forest, one of the most important paintings in Zambaccian's collection. In the 60s he would come to work in Romania during the summer. He discovered, while in Brittany, in fact, that he was able to focus upon the life of peasants, and this motive became one of his main motives in the 60s and the 70s during his travels to Romania. In 1864, by traveling to Romania and by crossing Poland, he discovered a community of Jews, and he became aware of the expressive force of this character, whom he included in his painting.
Another great painter that is present in the gallery here is Ion Andreescu, who we could say was a contemporary of Nicolae Grigorescu. They both studied at Barbizon, which was actually one of the most important painting schools in France. And I would like to talk about him also.
Ion Andreescu was encouraged by Grigorescu to go to France, and especially to go to Barbizon. We could say that between them the relationship was the relationship between a master and his student. Although Andreescu was not Grigorescu's direct student, but he went to Paris and then to Barbizon, encouraged by Grigorescu. And it is Grigorescu who encouraged him to go and paint outside, because we should say that after 1859, when the invention of portable tubes took place, the artists were able to go outside and to paint in front of the motif by capturing nature without transforming it in the studio as they used to. And in Zambaccian's collection we have this period of Romanian, at the same time European painting, illustrated by a series of landscapes made by Grigorescu and Andreescu. One of the masterpieces of the collection is Winter at Barbizon, a work which was presented at the Salon Officiel in Paris in 1881.
So we talked about Grigorescu and Andreescu, and now we are moving forward to other very important Romanian painters, Corneliu Baba and Tonița, and also Ștefan Lucian. And there is another interesting aspect, an interesting item that we find here in the gallery, but I will ask you about it a bit later. Let's talk about them firstly.
In this room we have paintings by Nicolae Tonița, a portrait of Grigore Zambaccian painted by Corneliu Baba. And in this same room, this room, we also have a sculpture by Constantin Brâncuș.
Exactly, that was the surprise here.
The portrait of a child, one of the portraits, Brâncuș sculpted before his departure for France. Therefore, this sculpture is important for understanding the evolution of Brâncuș's career after this encounter with French sculpture at the beginning of the 20th century.
And Lucian, who is behind us, he is another famous Romanian painter. He's famous for his still nature, for the beautiful flowers, but he does have an impressive story, personal life story.
Lucian is one of Zambaccian's favorite painters. Therefore, he intended to dedicate a whole room to his paintings. And in this collection, we have a series of works indicating several stages of Lucian's career, like in Grigorescu's case, because we have at the same time still life, landscape, landscape focusing upon flowers, and at the same time one of the masterpieces of the collection, the Bath, a work which belonged to the last period of Lucian's life. Lucian, after 1911, was no longer able to go outside and to paint landscapes, and we have an example of this landscape in this room, a landscape painted at Prebu. And because this illness affected his spine, he was confined to his room, and the motifs which he could represent in his works were flowers, fruit, and at the same time a series of portraits of the members of his family.
We are in what used to be the library of the Zambaccian residents, showing the fact that Zambaccian was not only passionate about art, but also about everything related to culture and intellectual activities. Of course, it's really great to imagine what it was like to be at the residence, reading a good book and being surrounded by masterpieces signed by all the great Romanian painters. I'm quite sure that his life was really interesting and exciting. But this is not necessarily the topic that I want to discuss about. It was just to introduce the viewers into the atmosphere of the house. Now we are surrounded by works signed by Teodor Paladi, another great Romanian painter. And I would like to talk about his work and also about his relationship with Zambaccian.
Zambaccian often went to his studio, especially in Paris. Paladi had a studio in Place Dauphine, and we have in this room a landscape capturing the atmosphere of the place where Paladi lived in Paris. And Zambaccian chose for his collection a series of works indicating various stages of Paladi's artistic career. We have still life examples, we have nudes in this room, and at the same time landscapes painted especially during the period Paladi stayed in France. And we have a self-portrait which has an interesting story, interesting and amusing at the same time, because Paladi, seeing that Zambaccian was very keen on buying this self-portrait, and because during that period other collectors wanted to buy his works, he decided to organize a competition between Zambaccian and another collector, Dr. Dona, inviting them to leave Bucharest at the same time and to come to his studio in Paris in order to buy this self-portrait. Dr. Dona went to the hotel to leave his luggage, while Zambaccian, arriving in Paris, went to Pallady's studio immediately, and like this he bought this self-portrait on which, if the visitors looked attentively, can discover that Pallady wrote Il m'a eu, that is, he defeated me. He, in this case, that is, he managed to buy the self-portrait.
Coming back a little bit to Pallady, I would like to know what is the actual style of his painting. Which school does he belong to?
It is difficult to include Pallady in a school of that period. We discover echoes from Impressionists, Post-Impressionists, and at the same time he introduces a series of realistic notes in his works. He manages to create a kind of synthesis of all these influences, which he discovered in Paris during the first part of the 20th century.
Even though we are still in the same house, admiring the collection of Grigore Zambaccian, we moved in a different atmosphere. We could say that we are virtually in France now, and we are going to talk about the French school and all the great artists coming from France, some of them being inspirational muses for the Romanian painters. Who do we have here?
First of all, we have a series of painters whose works were bought by Zambaccian in Paris. I would mention here Auguste Renoir, because a few people know that Auguste Renoir studied at École des Beaux-Arts at the same time when Grigorescu was there, and at the same time they entered École des Beaux-Arts the same year, and they worked in Sébastien Cornu's studio for a short period, both of them. And we have two works by Renoir, one of them indicating Renoir's passion for the representation of bathing women. This passion lasted more than 20 years in Renoir's career. We have in this room also a painting by Pissarro, painted in 1892 during this neo-impressionist period, when he made the composition by juxtaposing the brush strokes, as this portrait indicates. We also have a landscape by Sisley illustrating Zambaccian's fascination with this particular type of representing nature, and in many paintings included in his collection we discover this passion for luminous and serene colors, similar to the colors used by Sisley in this landscape. Two nudes painted by Matisse, who was a very good friend of Pallady's.
And there is also a very surprising Pablo Picasso in the collection of Zambaccian.
Yes, we also have the representation of a corrida by Pablo Picasso, very different from his experiments during the second and third part of his career, because the representation of the characters and of the scene itself is realistic. The contours are well defined, and we have the impression that we are in front of a very completely different Picasso if we look at this corrida. This element makes its presence in Zambaccian's collection more important because it indicates a stage in the evolution of his career.
Exactly, and there are absolutely no traces of Cubism in this painting, but the painting itself is actually beautiful and surprising because, as you mentioned, you really wouldn't expect it to be signed by the great Picasso, that everyone is accustomed in seeing unusual shapes. These shapes are very well defined, actually.
But we discover in this composition the Spanish origin introduced by Picasso in many of his works, painted even later during the Cubist period, and at the same time his fascination with Spanish traditions.
All right, our visit today was actually a permanent, a perpetuous discovery when it comes to Romanian painting and also famous painters. And one piece that caught my attention is actually the painting behind me. Impressive in size, but also in colors and technique. Who does it belong to?
We have here an impressive landscape by Nicolae Dărăscu, a monumental composition with the title The Tartar Graveyard in Baltic, a region where several Romanian artists went at the beginning of the 20th century in order to capture the sea, an element with which Dărăscu was very fascinated, and at the same time a particular type of light captured by several painters in their landscapes and portraits painted in Baltic. This monumental composition was one of the biggest paintings in Zambaccian's collection. Therefore, it was necessary to have a special place in order to present it. And at the same time, this painting indicates the Tartar minority included in many paintings by Dărăscu or by Iser or Tonița. Therefore, it has not only an aesthetic value but also a documentary value because it presents this graveyard and it captures all the dramatism of the scenes discovered by Dărăscu in front of this landscape.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I really hope that you have enjoyed the picturesque scenery at the Zambaccian Museum. And I believe that once again we can all realize that life without beauty and art is simply meaningless. Until next time, remember to make your life a beautiful story.